40 writers that spoke about Jesus within about 100 years of his life. If you take the Caesar of the time, you've only got 10 writings. That's the leader of basically the known world. And I've got 10 writings that survive. I've got 40 for Jesus Christ. So let's be fair again, right, as these intellectual, skeptical critics. So I was dealing with Jesus, and I was looking at the archaeology of Israel. And I was checking these things out. I was looking at the prophecies. I was staring at, pools where Jesus healed. I was basically taking walks. All these places are there. All this stuff checks out. These people, these places, these things, they happen. So the only thing I'm rejecting is some of this underlying theology. I'm rejecting it. Why? Because it hurt. I didn't like it. I don't want to deal with this. I brought this only because half hour before I came, I just thought this would be a really cool thing to print out. The Old Testament is really the New Testament concealed. And the New Testament is truly the Old Testament revealed. And when you read it as a skeptic, you've got to deal with it. I grabbed 40 prophecies out of over 300 of a coming Messiah in the Old Testament. All of these were laid down at least 400 years prior to the time of Christ. Just meditate on this. As I'm just going to read you a story without scripture citations. Any of you send me an email, I'll send it both this version and the one with scripture citations. Listen to this. The Messiah pre-exists time. He is the eternal Redeemer that will come to earth to reconcile mankind with God. Although Satan will try to attack him, the Messiah will have ultimate victory. One day he will rule over everything and all nations will bow down to him. The Messiah will descend from Shem, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah, Jesse, and David. He will be born in the city of Bethlehem in the county of Ephrathah when a bright star appears. It will be a miraculous virgin birth. The Messiah will be unique, having pre-existed his birth. He will perform many miracles, calming the sea, causing the blind to see, the deaf to hear, the lame to walk, and the mute to talk. He will be referred to in many ways, including God with us, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. He will be great teacher, and he will use parables. The Messiah will come to save mankind. He will become man's sin offering and present himself to Jerusalem as both the anointed king and the Passover lamb. This will occur 173,880 days after the decree by Artaxerxes Longimanus to rebuild both Jerusalem and the temple. So in early April 33 AD or thereabouts, the Messiah will present himself to a rejoicing Jerusalem riding on a donkey. But then he will suffer greatly. Many will reject him, including his friends. He will be betrayed by a friend for 30 pieces of silver. Later, that money will be thrown on the floor of the temple and will eventually go to a potter. At his trial, he will not defend himself. He will say nothing except as required by law. Israel will reject him. The Messiah will be taken to a mountaintop, identified to Abraham as Moriah, where the Lord himself will provide. There he'll be crucified with his hands and his feet pierced. His enemies will encircle him, mocking him, and will cast lots for his clothing. He will call to God, asking why he was forsaken. He will be given gall and wine. He will die with thieves, but unlike the thieves, none of his bones will be broken. His heart will fail, as indicated by blood and water spilling out when he is pierced with a spear. He will be buried in a rich man's grave, and in 3 days he will rise from the dead. Now, you guys, that's all Old Testament. I didn't get any of that from New Testament. That's all Jewish scriptures, the oracles of God that were maintained. Well, surely then, it was a bunch of religious zealots that holed up in caves somewhere that wrote all of this stuff after the fact to make their departed, dead teacher something more. You guys, we live in an awesome time in history. The Dead Sea Scrolls, you guys probably know about the find, a very miraculous find. You got your two Bedouin shepherd cousins that lose a goat in 1947. They are chucking rocks into caves around the Dead Sea to flush their goat out. Here's some pottery shatter in one of the caves. One cousin lets the other cousin down through a hole into the cave and comes across probably the greatest archaeological discovery of all time. For the next 12 years after that, multiple caves are discovered, and we've discovered books, fragments, every book of the Old Testament except for the book of Esther, which doesn't mean Esther's no good. It just means Esther hasn't been found in there. Remarkably, it's taken a long time to get all of these things because this was right before Israel became a state, so was this Jordanian land, is this Jordanian artifacts, everything's swirled around, academia hasn't really got a good look. Finally, we're all getting a good look. How many have been to Israel? You go to the Shrine of the Book Museum. It's a great museum that the whole thing actually goes down underground in the case of nuclear attack. It's pretty cool. The centerpiece of the Shrine of the Book Museum is what? You guys remember it right in the center? The Great Isaiah Scroll. For the Jews, the greatest thing in that museum is the Great Isaiah Scroll that was discovered in Cave 1 of the Dead Sea Scrolls. What's so profound about that? That scroll is fully intact, all 66 books of Isaiah. Where's the greatest messianic prophecy? Now, if I take Isaiah 53 from the Dead Sea Scrolls, that has been dated paleographically, scribally, carbon-14 if you go there, all sorts of different ways, by labs at University of Arizona, Zurich. Nobody has dated this scroll at less than 100 BC. Remember, Isaiah would have written it in 700 BC. I'm talking about this copy dates to no less than 100 BC, probably dates out to even 250 BC. Why is it profound? Because the Bible that you read today, Isaiah 53, as compared to the latest manuscript copy we had to that point in time, which dated to about 943 AD, a Masoretic text, and you compare that with the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I've got the Dead Sea Scroll, Isaiah 53, at least 100 BC, compared to a Masoretic text from 943 AD, compared to a Bible you can pick up today, and I'm going to use the King James only because that's Masoretic text. You compare those three, the word light and about 8 punctuation marks. That's all that's different. Now, for the skeptical mind like me that says, come on, show it to me. Those prophecies were really written down in black and white prior to the time that this Jesus Christ walked the earth? Yeah. We have a Greek version, the Septuagint version of the Old Testament scriptures laid down in 250 BC. You got to work really hard to reject the truth. And that's where I was in my journey. And again, I wasn't trying to justify anything. I was trying to just make sense as a skeptic. So finally, dealing with all of this stuff, I got to a place in my journey where what? Seriously, it got down to, as Jesus looked Peter in the eye and said, you've checked out all the stuff. You've looked at all the evidence. You've tested all the worldviews. You've laid out Plato. You've laid out Confucius. You've done all. Who do you say that I am? And I sat there. You're the Christ, the Son of the living God. There's no alternative. That's it.